Welcome back. Joining me this afternoon on our panel are the political strategists Bruce Hawker and Grahame Morris. Good afternoon to both of you. Bruce Hawker, you were intimately involved in the Queensland election campaign. Now that you've had a couple of days to reflect, are you surprised that it was as bad as it ended up getting? Had you had a sense at all that it would get that bad?
Look, we went into the campaign trailing by about 15 points and we came out of the campaign in exactly the same position. So a lot of advertisers did well and very few other people, I think. But I thought that it would actually get better in the last week of the campaign, and frankly it didn't. It just really just maintained its downward trajectory. So it was a very disappointing campaign, Ashley, and I'd like to be able to say more positive things about it, but I can't. It was a government that was 20 years old, and there'd been no change of... Well, Labor hadn't lost since 1989, really, except for a 2.5-year period in which Rob Borbidge governed as a result of a change of power on the floor of the Parliament. It was very, very tough for us. Health was not an issue we could run on because of problems in the with that so-called Tahitian prince, and before that the payroll debacle. So everywhere we went we were in a fair bit of trouble in that campaign. It was not an entirely surprising result, although I thought we would do better than we actually did do.
Graham, what sort of Premier do you think Campbell Newman will be? How difficult did he make life for Julia Gillard around the COAG table? I think he's said that he'd consider joining in with Colin Barnett and Fortescue in a legal bid against the mining tax if he did become Premier, which of course we've seen him sworn in today. Do you think that is a big problem for the Prime Minister?
Well, for a start, it's an extraordinary endorsement for him. You know, he's the sort of bloke who was actually born with the political dummy in his mouth. Both of his parents were ministers in Fraser government and the Howard government at various times. And I don't know, if you look at him already and you're watching during the campaign, if you were to describe him, he's sort of, well, as of now anyway, sort of an action man. You know, here we are, sort of day 2, and he's already talked to his public servants about, you know, the unemployment level they ought to be striving to reach, or the low unemployment level. Some of the cost of living stuff he wants sorted out, ministerial responsibility stuff, he's made some clear sort of demands there. Look, I think he's going to go all right. And when you think about it, he's going to have to, because the state's in a mess. But more to the point, it looks as if the Labor Party will be in opposition for at least 3 elections, which is about a decade. So Campbell Newman, you would think, is going to be leading that state for a long, long time. And you know, he's rewritten every campaign manual that's ever been devised. He's come out of nowhere with a thumping endorsement, and the Labor Party, well, just bloody awful, really.
But Graham, that's not good for voters, if you have such a weak opposition, what with Labor only holding on to 7 seats?
Yeah, I agree. Look, I am a great believer in a strong party system in this country. It has served us well. But every now and again, whether it's, you know, New South Wales recently, South Australia, in one that I ran, that Dean Brown was the Prime Minister, it used to be my great Trivial Pursuit question, which was what are the biggest 2 political hidings in Australia's political history? And the first one was Joh Bjelke-Petersen in 1974 in Queensland. The second was one of mine with Dean Brown in South Australia. But now everyone and his dog's going to know the answer. It's that Queensland Mayor bloke Newman in Queensland. He blew the Labor Party out of the water. There goes my bloody Trivial Pursuit question.
Well, yeah, when Queenslanders want to change, they seriously want to change, and they got one over the weekend. Bruce, on Saturday night during our election coverage, we were all speculating about what Anna Bligh might do. Yesterday we saw that she's going to resign, step aside from her seat. There'll be a by-election there, no doubt, to bring in someone who could lead the party. I think you said on Saturday night you thought she might actually stick around for 6 months or so to enable that transition. Was it the right call, do you think, for Anna Bligh to go now?
Look, I had a chat with her on Saturday after she made that announcement, and she made it very clear to me that she felt that being in the Parliament was not going to help Labor's recovery, and I think that's right. The only problem really for Labor, I think, is that having a by-election so close to the general election is going to add more trouble, really, to their problems that they've already got at the moment. And by no means is it certain that Labor would win that by-election. She's personally very popular in that seat. Having said that, maybe the electorate feels that, well, they've got Labor in the position that they probably felt they had to get it into, wanted to get it into, and that by driving the boot heel into Labor's throat is probably not the best thing to be doing. So I'd hope that Labor would have a good win there. I'm not sure who will end up being the candidate. Jackie Trad from the Labor Party headquarters is, I think, the early front runner for it, but of course there is talk about other candidates as well, including Cameron Dick, who was the Attorney General in the last government and a very bright young man. He was a member for Greenslopes, lost on Saturday night. So tough times for Labor. I think another thing, though, that they should be doing, Ashley, is seriously looking at the way in which they go about recruiting into the party. This is a, if there is an ideal time to do anything for Labor, this is a good time to be reviewing the way in which it pre-selects candidates, the way in which it endorses candidates, the way in which it elects leaders. I think Labor has to do a lot of that hard work that they're talking about doing in New South Wales, perhaps have a form of primary, maybe a combination of primary and a pre-selection of members, so that you get people from outside the party voting, and starting to look at a general rank and file election of the leader further down the line. Because if Labor doesn't actually start to grow its base from this terrible position that it's in now, then 3 terms in opposition that Graham's talking about could be optimistic.
Well, while they're doing that soul-searching, Bruce, should they also be looking at the campaign that you were involved in, that it could have been too negative? That's one of the key criticisms of the way Anna Bligh did run the campaign. Well,
that criticism obviously has been made. I would say in its defence, though, is that we'll show me a better one. We're dealing with a 20-year-old government. Health was a big issue running against us. We had questions about breaches of faith over the sale of assets. We didn't really have too many places to go, and in fact a number of very legitimate questions had been raised by the media about Campbell Newman during his time as Lord Mayor. We ran with it. With the benefit of hindsight, I'd say probably the campaign was too long because it just dragged on and on and on, that negativity. I think that was probably a problem for us, but these things are always perfectly viewed from the rear vision mirror. At the time, you just have to do what you can, and I think that was the best campaign that we could put together.
It was.
I just want to get your.
It was a grubby campaign run by grubs. You know, you just look. Nobody, no politician, no leader minds getting a smack on the head, but we haven't seen one before. We haven't seen one before where we've got sort of families and relatives dragged into it, and in most cases erroneously. And the people of Queensland had a look at it and said, we don't like this. And you can just see the same sort of thing bubbling over in Canberra at the moment. The Labor Party has absolutely nothing to say except we don't like Tony Abbott. And it is becoming a sort of a mindset in the Labor Party that there's this paranoia about the coalition leader. And instead of talking about, you know, what they're on about or you know, some of the policy stuff or where they want to take the country, everything finishes with, but we don't like Tony Abbott. And it's becoming embarrassing.
Well, just 2 things
Bruce,
on that.
we did hear some of your thoughts about this during the Rudd Stoush when you were making comments about the future for federal Labor. Do you think after Queensland, Julia Gillard should be very fearful that federal Labor will face a similar wipeout?
Well, just a couple of things before I get to that, Ashley. One, Graham conveniently forgets some of the great negative campaigns run by the Liberals, particularly the 2004 campaign, where they absolutely assassinated Mark Latham's character and did it quite effectively. So I don't think anyone should be trying to take the moral high ground on this issue. It's not as if negative campaigning is something which is new to the arena. As to Tony Abbott, well, Tony Abbott has got a lot to explain as far as his economic management is going to go if he does become Prime Minister. That's the big question that Labor's asking at the moment. I don't think that's an unfair question at all, and I don't think they're going to his personality other than to say this fellow is not telling us where the money's going to come from. The third part of your question on the Labor and Canberra, well, you know, this is a challenging time for Labor in Canberra, and it's particularly difficult in Queensland. And without trying to revisit anything that's happened in the past with Kevin Rudd's candidature, one of the things that was a problem for Labor in 2010 was that Kevin Rudd was a Prime Minister who hailed from Queensland. We lost a lot of seats up there, and in the recent leadership stoush, a decision was made to again reject his candidacy for the Prime Ministership. So that's going to be a big challenge for Labor. They won't have Rudd running for the leadership again. So the challenge now is for Julia Gillard and the Cabinet to really focus very assiduously on Queensland, more than other states, because in Queensland there is that sense that they've been denied the leader that they wanted. Now, I'm not trying to overly politicise that. I think that's just an objective fact that the government's going to have to work with in the coming months and lead up to the 2013 election. That means spending a lot more time in Queensland selling the carbon tax compensation package as aggressively as they can.
Bruce, Hawker and Grahame Morris, we are out of time. Very quickly, Grahame, we've got probably about 10 seconds for a final word.
Okay, you wouldn't want to be Kevin Rudd's cat, would you? If he was challenging now, he'd get 10 more votes. The Queensland Labor Party would have got 10 more seats. They'd have still got thrashed, but it would have been closer.
We'll leave that one to you, Grahame.
Okay, that's all we have time for. Grahame Morris, Bruce Hawker, appreciate your time as always. Thanks for that.